Kim Tiho was alone in the darkness of space when he found them. His cargo ship, the Hanel 7, was an old vessel. It made strange sounds at night. The metal walls would creak and groan like a tired old man. Tiho had learned to ignore these sounds over the years. He had been flying cargo routes for 15 years now, and he knew his ship like he knew his own hands. The route was simple: pick up supplies from Station Delta 9, deliver them to the mining colony on Vega 3, come back, do it again. It was boring work, but Tiho liked boring. Boring meant safe. Boring meant he could drink his coffee in peace and watch old movies on the small screen in his cabin. But space did not care about what Tiho liked. The alarm started screaming at 3 in the morning ship time. Tiho jumped out of his bed so fast that he hit his head on the low ceiling. He ran to the control room, still wearing his sleeping clothes, and looked at the scanner screen. Something was out there. At first he thought it was just debris. The Corva Nebula was famous for its debris fields. Old ships, broken satellites, pieces of rock floating forever in the cold emptiness. But this object was different. It was moving in a strange pattern, spinning slowly, and it was sending out a weak signal. A distress signal. Tiho sat down in his pilot chair and rubbed his tired eyes. Protocol was clear about this situation. He should report the signal to the nearest station and continue his route. Let the rescue teams handle it. He was just a cargo pilot. He was not trained for rescue missions. But the signal was so weak, so desperate, like a small voice crying for help in a storm. Tiho looked at the screen for a long time. Then he turned his ship toward the signal. It took him 2 hours to reach the object. When he finally saw it through his window, his breath stopped in his chest. It was an escape pod, small, damaged. There were burn marks all over its surface, and one side was completely crushed. Whatever had happened to this pod, it had been violent. Tiho used the ship's mechanical arm to grab the pod and pull it into his cargo bay. He put on his work suit and walked down to see what he had found. The pod was in terrible condition. He had to use a cutting tool to open the door because the normal release was broken. When the door finally fell open with a loud crash, Tiho pointed his flashlight inside. He expected to find bodies, dead aliens maybe, or broken equipment. What he found made him drop his flashlight. There were 3 small creatures huddled together in the corner of the pod. They were about the size of house cats, covered in scales that would have been bright red if they were healthy. But they were not healthy. Their scales were dull and gray. Their eyes were closed. Their small bodies were shaking from the cold. Tiho recognized them immediately. Every human who traveled in space knew about the Dracoran. They were called the Red Dragon Packs. They were the most feared predators in 12 star systems. Their adults stood 9 feet tall with claws that could cut through metal like paper. They had burned entire human colonies to the ground. They showed no mercy. They felt no pity. The military had clear instructions about them: avoid at all costs, and if contact was unavoidable, shoot first. And Tiho was looking at 3 of their bobbies. For a long moment he just stood there. His heart was beating so fast he could hear it in his ears. His hands were shaking. Every part of his brain was screaming at him to close the pod, push it back into space. These creatures would grow up to become monsters, killers. The galaxy would be safer without them. But then one of them made a sound. It was a small sound, weak, like a kitten crying for its mother. The creature opened its eyes just a little bit and looked at Tiho. Its eyes were golden, like 2 small suns, and in those eyes Tiho saw something he did not expect. Fear. These bobbies were afraid. They were cold. They were hungry. They were dying, and they did not understand why they had been thrown away into the darkness. Tiho thought about his grandmother. She had raised him after his parents died in a factory accident. She was a small woman with strong hands and a warm heart. She used to tell him stories at night, and her favorite lesson was simple: kindness is not a weakness. Kindness is the strongest thing a person can have. What would grandmother do? Tiho whispered to himself. He already knew the answer. Tiho climbed into the pod. The creatures tried to move away from him, but they were too weak. He picked them up one by one, very carefully. They were so cold. Their scales felt like ice against his skin. He could feel their tiny hearts beating, but just barely. He carried them back to his living area. He found his warmest blanket, the one his grandmother had made for him before she died. He wrapped the creatures in it, but they were still shaking. The blanket was not enough. So Tiho did the only thing he could think of. He opened his jacket and placed the 3 small creatures against his chest, right over his heart. Then he wrapped the blanket around all of them and sat down in his chair. At first, nothing happened. The creatures stayed stiff and cold, but then slowly they began to feel his warmth. They felt the steady beat of his heart, and something changed. The first one relaxed, then the second, then the third. They pressed their small bodies closer to his chest, seeking more of his warmth, and then one of them started to make a new sound. It was a purr, a soft, gentle vibration that Tiho could feel against his ribs. Soon all 3 of them were purring. They pushed their heads under his chin. Their small claws, which would one day be able to tear through steel, held onto his shirt like they would never let go. Tiho sat there in the quiet of his ship, holding 3 baby dragons against his heart. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know how he would feed them. He did not know what he would tell the authorities. He did not even know if they would survive. But right now, in this moment, none of that mattered. 3 small creatures had been thrown away like garbage. They had been left to die alone in the cold darkness, and Tiho had found them. He was not a hero. He was not a soldier. He was just a cargo pilot with an old ship and a heart that could not walk away from something that needed help. Outside the window, the stars continued their endless dance. The universe did not care about 1 human and 3 alien bobbies. It was too big, too cold, too empty. But inside the Hanel 7, something warm was happening, something that would change everything. The creatures slept against Tiho's chest, safe for the first time since they had been born. And Tiho, without knowing it, had just become something he never expected to be. He had become a father. The engine died on the 3rd day. Tiho was in the middle of feeding the creatures when he heard it, a terrible sound like metal screaming, then silence. The lights flickered once, twice, and then switched to the dim red of emergency power. He ran to the control room, his heart sinking with every step. The screen told him what he already feared. The main engine was dead. The fuel line had cracked during his rescue of the escape pod. He had been leaking fuel for 3 days without knowing it. Tiho sat down slowly and did the math in his head. Station Myra 12 was the closest port. With the backup thrusters he could still get there, but it would take time, a lot of time. 37 days. He had enough food and water for himself, barely, but the creatures were a different problem. In the first week, Tiho learned more about the Dracoran than any human had ever learned before, not from books or military reports. He learned from watching, from trying, from failing and trying again. The creatures could not control their body heat. This surprised him. The fearsome red dragons, the terrors of 12-star systems, got cold easily. Without their mother's warmth, the bobbies would die. So Tiho kept them inside his jacket during the day. At night, they slept on his chest under the blanket. He tried to feed them the standard protein paste that he had in his supplies. They refused it. They turned their heads away and made unhappy sounds. He tried water. They would not drink it. On the 5th day, Tiho was getting desperate. The creatures were getting weaker. They had stopped purring. They barely moved. He looked at his own dinner, a simple meal of rice and vegetables, heated in the small kitchen unit. Not much, but it was real food. With nothing else to try, Tiho took some rice in his fingers and held it to the smallest creature's mouth. At first, nothing happened. Then the creature sniffed. Its tiny tongue came out and touched the rice. And it ate. Tiho laughed out loud. The sound surprised him. He had not laughed in days, but watching this small alien creature eat rice from his fingers filled him with a joy he could not explain. From that day on, he shared every meal with them. He would chew the food first to make it soft, just like mother birds do for their bobbies. It was strange. It was probably not very clean, but it worked. He gave them names on the 10th day. The largest one, who was always the first to eat and the first to explore, he called Bull. It meant fire. The middle one, who liked to sit on his shoulder and look out the window at the stars, he called Buell. It meant star. And the smallest one, who was quiet and gentle and liked to sleep more than the others, he called K-Cum. It meant dream. Bal, Buell, and K-Cum, his 3 children. The days passed slowly on the drifting ship. Tiho fell into a routine: wake up with the creatures on his chest, feed them breakfast, check the ship systems, exercise a little in the cargo bay, feed them lunch, try to fix things that were broken, feed them dinner, sleep. The creatures grew stronger every day. Their scales became brighter, changing from dull gray to beautiful red. They started to play, chasing each other around the small living space. They made sounds that Tiho began to understand. A high chirp meant happy. A low growl meant hungry. A soft trill meant they wanted to be held. And they always wanted to be near him. If Tiho went to the bathroom, they would sit outside the door and cry until he came out. If he tried to work on the engines, they would climb up his legs and into his jacket. At night, they fought over who got to sleep closest to his heart. On the 20th day, his communication system managed to catch a signal. It was weak and full of static, but it was a voice, a human voice. "This is Dr. Park Sujin from the Frontier Research Station. I picked up your distress beacon. Can you hear me?" Tiho grabbed the microphone so fast he almost dropped it. Yes, I can hear you. My name is Kim Tiho. I'm a cargo pilot. My engine is dead and I'm drifting towards Station Myra 12. There was a pause. When the doctor spoke again, her voice was careful. "Mr. Kim, your beacon is transmitting some strange life signs. My equipment is showing 4 life forms on your ship, but you are registered as a solo pilot." Tiho looked down at Bull, who was currently trying to eat his sleeve. "That's a long story." He told her everything: the escape pod, the creatures, how he had been caring for them. When he finished, there was a very long silence. "Mr. Kim," Dr. Park finally said, "do you understand what you have done?" "I saved 3 bobbies from dying," he answered. "You saved 3 Dracoran royal hatchlings, and they have imprinted on you." Tiho did not know what that meant. Dr. Park explained. "Dracoran hatchlings," she said, "imprint on the first warm body that cares for them. It is a survival mechanism. In the wild, they would imprint on their mother. The mother's heartbeat becomes their definition of safety, of home, of family. But these 3 had not imprinted on a Dracoran. They had imprinted on Tiho. Their brains have changed," Dr. Park said, her voice serious. "At a biological level, they now recognize your heartbeat as their mother. You are not just their caretaker, Mr. Kim. You are their pack father. This bond cannot be broken." Tiho sat in silence for a moment. K-Cum had fallen asleep in his lap. Buell was on his shoulder, watching the communication screen with curiosity. Bull was trying to climb onto his head. "What happens if they are separated from me?" he asked. Another pause. "Based on what we know about Dracoran biology, they would probably die or go mad with grief. The imprint bond is that strong." Tiho looked at his 3 small creatures. They looked back at him with their golden eyes full of trust, full of love. "Then I guess we stay together," he said simply. Dr. Park had more news, but it was not good. She had been researching where the escape pod came from. It had been ejected from a Dracoran broodship. Someone had deliberately thrown these hatchlings into space. "There was a clan war," she explained. "A A rival faction stole these eggs from the pack mother and ejected them as an insult. These are not just any hatchlings, Mr. Kim. They are royal children. The pack mother has been searching for them. Searching. She has destroyed 3-star systems looking for her bobbies. Millions are dead, and she is still searching. Tiho felt cold despite the warmth of the creatures on his body. What happens when she finds me? I don't know, Dr. Park admitted. No human has ever been in this situation before. That night Tiho could not sleep. He sat in his chair with the creatures on his chest, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, a mother was looking for her children, a mother who could burn worlds. And he was just a cargo pilot with an old ship and a broken engine. Bull woke up and made a small sound. Tiho looked down. The creature was looking at him with those golden eyes. "It's okay," Tiho whispered. He stroked the small head with his finger. "Whatever happens, I'll protect you, I promise." Bull purred and went back to sleep. On the 36th day, the proximity alarm went off. Tiho rushed to the scanner. What he saw made his blood freeze. 17 massive signatures were appearing from Fold space. Warships. Each one was bigger than any human vessel he had ever seen. They were shaped like dragons, with wings of metal and mouths that glowed with weapons. The Red Dragon pack had found him. Tiho stood there, alone on his small ship, surrounded by the most dangerous fleet in the galaxy. He should have been terrified. He should have been preparing to fight, or to run, or to beg for his life. Instead, he looked down at Bull, Bjol, and K-Cum. They were awake now, sensing his fear. They pressed closer to him, seeking comfort. Tiho took a deep breath. He sat down in his chair. He pulled the creatures close to his heart. "It's okay," he said again, his voice calm. "Your mother is here." And he waited for whatever would come next. The flagship of the Red Dragon pack was called Vainripper. Tiho watched it through his window with a mixture of terror and wonder. It was not like any ship he had ever seen. It was alive. The hull was made of bone and something that looked like black metal, but it moved. It breathed. Veins of red light pulsed along its surface like blood flowing through a body. The ship was bigger than a human battlecruiser. It was bigger than a space station. It looked like a dragon that had swallowed a mountain. His communication screen crackled. A voice came through. It was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "Human vessel, you have something that belongs to the pack mother. Surrender now or be destroyed." Tiho's hands were shaking, but he kept his voice steady. "I have your children. They are safe. They are healthy. I will not hurt them." Silence. Then the voice again, this time angrier. "You dare to touch the royal hatchlings. You dare to speak of them. Prepare to die, meat creature." The communication cut off. Tiho watched as a smaller ship separated from the flagship and moved toward him. It was a boarding vessel. They were coming. He should have been running. He should have been hiding. He should have been doing something. Instead, Tiho walked to the cargo bay and sat down on the floor with his back against a storage crate. He held Bull, Bjol, and K-Cum close to his chest. They could feel his fear. They were making small, worried sounds. "SHH," he whispered. "It's going to be okay. You're going to see your real mother now. She's been looking for you for a long time." The hatchlings did not understand his words, but they understood his tone. They pressed closer to him, their small bodies warm against his chest. Tiho closed his eyes and focused on his breathing. Slow, steady, calm. The ship shook as the boarding vessel connected to his airlock. He heard the horrible sound of metal being cut. Then footsteps, heavy footsteps that made the floor shake. They were inside. The door to the cargo bay exploded inward. Tiho did not open his eyes. He heard them enter, many of them. He could smell them too, a strange smell like smoke and metal and something animal. He heard their breathing, deep and slow like huge bellows. And then he heard them stop. For a long moment there was no sound at all, just silence. Tiho finally opened his eyes. The Dracoran warriors surrounded him. They were exactly as the military reports described, 9 feet tall, bodies covered in red scales harder than armor, claws like swords, eyes that burned with golden fire. Each one of them could kill 100 humans without effort. And they were all staring at him. Not at him, Tiho realized, at what was on his chest. Bul, Bjol, and K-Cum had fallen asleep. The slow rhythm of Tiho's heartbeat and the warmth of his body had calmed them despite all the noise and chaos. They were curled up against him, their small bodies rising and falling with his breathing. They looked peaceful, safe, happy. One of the warriors stepped forward. He was larger than the others, with scars all over his face. His claws were raised, ready to strike. But he did not strike. "What is this?" the warrior growled. "This human guards the young." Another warrior hissed, "It is a trick, kill him now." "No," the first warrior's voice was hard. "Look at them, the hatchlings sleep. They would not sleep in the presence of danger. They feel safe with this creature." The warriors began to argue among themselves. Their language was harsh and guttural, full of sounds that Tiho's ears could barely understand. But he caught one word that repeated several times, Kithvara. He did not know what it meant. The argument stopped suddenly. The warriors turned toward the door and lowered their heads. Someone new was coming. She was smaller than the warriors, but somehow more terrifying. Her scales were the color of fresh blood. Her eyes were not just golden, they were like liquid metal, swirling with power and rage. A crown of black horns grew from her head, and when she walked, the warriors moved aside like water parting before a stone. Pack Mother Selith had arrived. She walked slowly through the cargo bay, her eyes fixed on Tiho. He could feel her anger. It was like heat from a furnace pressing against his skin. She wanted to kill him. He could see it in every line of her body. But then she saw her children. Selith stopped. For just a moment, something other than rage flickered across her face. Surprise, wonder, and something that looked almost like hope. "My eggs," she whispered. "My stolen eggs." She stepped closer. The warriors tensed. Tiho's heart was beating so fast he thought it would burst. But he did not move. He did not try to run or fight or beg. He just sat there, holding her children, and let her look. Selith knelt down in front of him. She was so close that he could feel her breath, hot against his face. Her claws could cut him open in a second. He was completely helpless. But Bul, Bjol, and K-Cum were still sleeping, still purring, still peaceful. Selith looked at her children for a long time. Then she looked at Tiho. Her golden eyes met his human eyes. "Why?" she asked. Tiho blinked. He had expected many things, threats, demands, violence, but not this simple question. "Why what?" he asked. "Why did you save them?" Selith's voice was quiet now, confused. "You are human, we are your enemies. We have killed millions of your kind, we have burned your worlds. You had every reason to let them die, to kill them yourself, but instead..." She looked at her sleeping children again. "Instead, you kept them alive, you kept them warm, you made them safe." She looked back at him. "Why?" Tiho thought about the question. He thought about all the reasons he could give, about duty, about morality, about what his grandmother had taught him. But in the end, the answer was simple. "They were cold," he said. Selith stared at him. "I found them in the darkness and they were cold," Tiho continued. "They were scared. They were dying. They did not ask to be thrown away. They did not choose to be my enemy. They were just bobbies, alone and afraid." He looked down at Bul, Bjol, and K-Cum. His voice was soft. "What kind of person would I be if I walked away from that?" Selith did not respond. She just kept staring at him, as if trying to understand something that made no sense to her. One of the warriors spoke up. "Pack Mother, let us kill this creature and take the hatchlings. We are wasting time." Selith raised one claw, and the warrior went silent immediately. "This human," she said slowly, "sat with my children against his chest. He kept them warm with his own body. He fed them from his own food. She stood up and turned to face her warriors. By the old laws, any creature that guards the young while they sleep is protected. To kill him now would bring shame upon our entire clan. The warriors growled, but none of them argued. Selith looked back at Tiho. Her expression was unreadable. You will come with us to the flagship. The Council of Fangs will decide what to do with you. And the children? Tiho asked. Selith's eyes softened just slightly. They will come too, for now. They seem to want to stay where they are. It was true. Even with all the movement and noise, Bull, Bjol, and K-Cum had not woken up. They stayed pressed against Tiho's chest, sleeping soundly, trusting him to keep them safe. Tiho stood up slowly, careful not to disturb them. The warriors parted to let him pass. None of them touched him. As he walked toward the boarding ship, surrounded by creatures that could end his life in a heartbeat, Tiho felt strangely calm. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know if he would survive. But for now, 3 small creatures were sleeping against his heart. And that was enough. The inside of the Vainripper was like walking through the body of a living creature. The walls pulsed with red light. The floor was warm beneath Tiho's feet like skin. Strange sounds echoed through the corridors, breathing, heartbeats, whispers in a language he could not understand. The Dracoran warriors led him deeper into the ship. Other aliens stopped to watch him pass. They were all huge, all dangerous, all looking at him like he was something between a curiosity and a meal. But none of them attacked, none of them even touched him. Bull, Bjol, and K-Cum were awake now, looking around with wide golden eyes. They had never seen their own kind before. They made small sounds of confusion and pressed closer to Tiho's chest. They finally reached a massive chamber at the heart of the ship. The Council of Fangs was waiting. There were 12 of them sitting in a circle on elevated platforms. They were old. Tiho could tell by the scars on their scales and the weight in their eyes. These were not just warriors. These were leaders, judges, executioners. In the center of the circle was a small platform. Tiho was pushed onto it. The eldest counselor stood up. His name was Gorvax. He was missing 1 eye and 3 fingers from his left hand, but he radiated power like heat from a sun. A human stands before the Council of Fangs, Gorvax announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. This is unprecedented. Let the charges be read. Another counselor, a female with silver scales, stepped forward with a tablet of stone. The human known as Kim Tiho is charged with the following crimes against the Red Dragon Pack. She began to read. First, he touched the royal hatchlings without permission. Under our law, the punishment is death by flaying. Tiho felt his stomach drop. Second, he fed the royal hatchlings with human food. Under our law, the punishment is death by burning. The chamber was silent. The counselors watched Tiho with cold eyes. Third, he gave names to the royal hatchlings. Under our law, this privilege is reserved only for bloodkin. The punishment is death by crushing. The silver-scaled counselor put down her tablet. The human has earned 3 deaths. How does he answer these charges? Every eye in the chamber was on Tiho. He could feel the weight of their hatred, their disgust. To them, he was less than an insect. He was a prey animal that had dared to touch their sacred young. But Tiho thought about 37 days on a broken ship. He thought about Bull learning to eat rice from his fingers. He thought about Bjol sitting on his shoulder, watching the stars. He thought about K-Cum falling asleep to the sound of his heartbeat. I answer that I am guilty, he said. His voice was steady. I touched them because they were dying of cold. I fed them because they were starving. I named them because, he paused, because they deserved names. They deserved to be someone, not just something. The counselors erupted in angry shouts. Some demanded his immediate execution. Others argued about which death he should suffer first. The noise was deafening. Packmother Selith raised her hand, and silence fell. "Before we continue," she said, "there is something the council should see." She gestured to a guard who brought forward a cage. Inside the cage were Bull, Buell, and K-Cum. Someone had taken them from Tiho while he was being charged. The hatchlings were not okay. They were screaming, high, terrible sounds that made Tiho's heart break. They were throwing themselves against the bars of the cage trying to get out. They were biting anyone who came close. Buell, sweet, gentle Buell, had blood on her teeth from attacking a guard. "They have been like this since we separated them from the human," Seleth said. "They will not eat. They will not sleep. They will not let anyone touch them." She looked at Tiho. "Call them." Tiho did not hesitate. "Bull, Buell, K-Cum, I'm here." The screaming stopped instantly. All three hatchlings turned toward his voice. They began to chirp and cry, reaching through the bars toward him. Seleth opened the cage. The hatchlings exploded out like small red rockets. They ran across the chamber floor, ignoring all the massive Dracorin around them, and threw themselves at Tiho. He caught them and held them close. They buried themselves in his jacket, making sounds of relief and joy. Within minutes they were calm. Within 5 minutes, K-Cum was already falling asleep. The council was silent. They had all seen it. The human had done what none of them could do. He had calmed the royal hatchlings with nothing but his voice and his warmth. "The imprint bond is real," said a new voice from the entrance. Everyone turned. A human woman was walking into the chamber, flanked by 2 Dracorin escorts. Behind her was a human man in a diplomatic uniform. Dr. Park Sujin and Lieutenant Yu Hansal had arrived. "I am a xenobiologist," Sujin said, stepping forward without fear. "I have been studying the situation remotely. The hatchlings have imprinted on this man at a genetic level. They recognize his heartbeat as their definition of home and safety. If you separate them permanently, the hatchlings will die." She showed them data on a small tablet, charts, graphs, brain scans. "This is not a choice, it is biology. These 3 will not survive without their pack father." Lieutenant Hansal stepped forward. "On behalf of the United Human Federation, I am here to negotiate. We understand that this situation is unusual, but we ask the Council to consider mercy." Gorvax slammed his fist on his platform. "Mercy, for a human who dared to touch our sacred young, never, he must die." "If he dies, the hatchlings die with him," Sujin said calmly. "Is that what you want?" The council erupted again. Some argued that the hatchlings' lives were worth more than honor. Others said that honor was everything, and it would be better for the young to die than to be forever bonded to a human. The argument went on for hours. Tiho sat in the middle of it all, holding the sleeping hatchlings, waiting to learn if he would live or die. Finally, Gorvax raised his hand for silence. His one eye was fixed on Tiho with something that looked almost like respect. "There is one solution," he said slowly. "One way that this human can earn the right to live. One way that he can prove he truly belongs to the pack." The chamber went quiet. "The trial of flames." Gasps echoed through the council. Seleth stepped forward, her eyes wide. "Gorvax, no. No human has ever attempted the trial. It would be certain death." "That is his choice to make." Gorvax looked at Tiho. "The trial of flames is the most sacred test of our people. Those who pass become true members of the pack with all rights and honors. Those who fail do not return." He leaned forward. "What say you, human? Will you face the fire for the sake of these children? Or will you die here now with 3 deaths on your record?" Tiho looked down at Bull, Buell, and K-Cum. They were looking back at him with complete trust, complete love. He thought about all the logical reasons to refuse. He was just a cargo pilot. He was not strong like the Dracorin. He was not built for fire and pain. He would almost certainly die. But if he refused, they would kill him anyway. And then these 3 small creatures, who had never asked for any of this, would suffer. Tiho looked up at Gorvax. "I accept." The burning grounds was a moon made of fire. Volcanoes covered its surface like wounds that never healed. Rivers of lava flowed between mountains of black rock. The air was poison. The ground could collapse at any moment, dropping anything into pools of liquid fire below. This was where the Dracoran tested their greatest warriors. This was where legends were born. And this was where Kim Tiho, a simple cargo pilot from Earth, now stood. He wore no armor. He carried no weapons. The Dracoran had given him only one thing, a thin suit that would protect him from the poisonous air for 6 hours. After that, he would suffocate. The rules of the trial were simple: cross the fire plains, reach the ember pit at the other end, take the sacred stone from inside, bring it back. Most Dracoran warriors trained their entire lives for this test. Many still failed. Their bodies littered the plains, preserved forever in ash and stone. Tiho looked out at the hellscape before him and felt fear. Real, cold fear that made his legs shake and his stomach turn. But then he thought about Bull, Bjol, and K-Cum. They were back on the flagship, crying for him, waiting for him, trusting him to come back. He took his first step onto the burning grounds. The entire Dracoran fleet was watching through cameras and drones. This had never happened before. A human attempting the trial of flames. Most expected him to die within the first hour. Tiho did not move fast. He could not. His human body was not built for this environment. The heat pressed against him like a physical weight. Sweat poured down his face and turned to steam almost instantly. But Tiho had something the Dracoran did not expect. He had patience. The Dracoran warriors relied on their strength. They charged through obstacles. They leaped over gaps. They powered through pain. But Tiho was not strong. He could not charge or leap or power through anything. So instead he watched. He studied the geysers that shot flame into the sky and learned their patterns. He counted the seconds between eruptions. He found the safe moments to move. He watched the ground and learned to read it. The rock that looked solid but would crumble. The paths that seemed dangerous but were actually stable. He moved slowly, testing each step, never rushing. When he could not go through an obstacle, he went around. When he could not go around, he waited. The first hour passed. Tiho was still alive. On the flagship, the Dracoran watched in growing disbelief. This weak creature, this soft human, was doing something impossible. He was not fighting the fire. He was dancing with it. Dr. Park Sujin watched with tears in her eyes. Lieutenant Hansal had stopped breathing. Pack Mother Selith sat in her throne, her golden eyes fixed on the screen. She had not moved in hours. The second hour passed, then the third. Tiho's skin was blistering now. Every breath was agony. His body was screaming at him to stop, to give up, to lie down and let the fire take him. He kept walking. In his mind he heard a voice, his grandmother's voice from long ago. When the path is too hard, Tiho, do not fight it. Flow around it like water around stone. The stone may be stronger, but the water is patient. And in the end, patient water wears away even the strongest stone. He thought about Bull, learning to eat rice from his fingers. He thought about Bjol, sitting on his shoulder and watching the stars. He thought about K-Cum, sleeping against his heart. His children were waiting for him. He would not fail them. The ember pit was a crater at the center of the burning grounds. Inside it, protected by walls of flame, was the sacred stone. It was black as night and smooth as glass, formed from the first fire that ever burned on this moon. Tiho stood at the edge of the crater and looked down. The flames inside were blue and white, hotter than anything he had faced before. There was no pattern here, no safe path. The fire moved like a living thing, hungry and random. He had come so far, but this last challenge seemed impossible. Tiho closed his eyes. He thought about his grandmother's words again, flow like water, be patient. But there was no time for patience here. His air supply was running low. His body was failing. Then he understood. Water does not only flow around stone, sometimes it flows through. Tiho opened his eyes and jumped into the ember pit. On the flagship, everyone gasped. Selith stood up from her throne. But Tiho was not dead. He was moving, fast, faster than he had moved all day. He had been saving his energy for this moment. He rolled under flames. He jumped over rivers of fire. He did not try to avoid the heat anymore. He accepted it. Let it burn him. Use the pain to move faster. His hand closed around the sacred stone. He climbed out of the pit with burns covering most of his body. His suit was melting. His lungs were filling with smoke. He could barely see. But he held the stone. The walk back was the hardest thing Tiho had ever done. He fell 3 times. Each time he got back up. His body had stopped feeling pain. Everything was just distant, like he was watching himself from far away. One step, another. He could see the end now, the edge of the burning grounds, safety. His legs gave out 10 meters from the finish. Tiho lay on the hot ground, the sacred stone still clutched in his burned hand. He could not move. He could not breathe. He was dying. But he was so close. With the last of his strength, Tiho pulled himself forward. His arms scraped against the rock. His burned skin left bloody trails behind him. 5 meters, 4, 3, 2, 1. He crossed the line and collapsed. On the flagship there was complete silence, then a sound that no human had ever heard before. The entire Red Dragon pack was roaring, not in anger, in awe. Kim Tiho, a human, had completed the trial of flames. When Tiho woke up, he was in a medical bay. His entire body was wrapped in bandages. Machines beeped around him. Everything hurt. But there was a warm weight on his chest. He looked down. Bul, Bjol, and K-Cum were there, curled up against his heart. They were purring so loud that the machines were shaking. The door opened. Pack Mother Selith walked in. She looked different now. The rage was gone from her eyes. In its place was something else, something that looked almost like respect. She knelt beside his bed. In Dracoran culture, only the most honored were knelt to. "The council has made its decision," she said. "By completing the trial of flames, you have proven yourself worthy of the pack. From this day forward, you are Kethvara's, Pack Father of Flame, the first non-Dracoran to ever hold this title." Tiho blinked. What? "You are Pack Father," Selith repeated. "Bul, Bjol, and K-Cum are legally and spiritually your children. No one can take them from you. No one can harm you. You are protected by every member of the Red Dragon pack." She stood up. "You will stay with us. You will help raise the royal hatchlings. And in time, perhaps you will teach us something about this strange human quality you have shown." "What quality?" Tiho asked. Selith looked at him for a long moment. "When I asked why you saved my children, you said they were cold, as if it were simple, as if anyone would do the same." She shook her head slowly. "My own kind betrayed me, stole my children, threw them into the void to die as an insult, and a stranger, a human, an enemy, found them and loved them." Her voice was quiet. "We have spent 10,000 years conquering the galaxy through fire and war. You conquered our hearts with a blanket and a lullaby. Perhaps we have much to learn." She turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she stopped. "Thank you, Kim Tiho, for saving my children when no one else would." And then she was gone. Tiho lay back against his pillow. Bul woke up and licked his chin with a rough tongue. Bjol made a happy chirping sound. K-Cum stayed asleep as always. He was burned. He was broken. He was a human alone among aliens who had been his enemies for centuries. But he was alive. His children were safe, and against all odds he had found a new family. Outside the window, the stars continued their endless dance. The universe was still cold, still dark, still dangerous. But inside this room, there was warmth. There was love. There was a man who had walked through fire for the sake of 3 small creatures who needed him. The Red Dragon Pack had come looking for blood. They had found something far more powerful. They had found the heart of a human. 5 years later, the Galactic Council received a message that changed everything. The Dracoran, the terror of 12 star systems, had signed a non-aggression treaty with humanity. When asked why, Pack Mother Selith gave only one answer. We protect our Pack Father's people, all of them. And in the archives of human Dracoran history, there is a single photograph that historians still cannot explain. A middle-aged Korean man, scarred and smiling, sitting in a garden on the Dracoran homeworld. 3 massive red dragons, each now the size of a shuttle, are curled around him like overgrown cats. Bul Buol and Kaikum never stopped napping on his chest. They just got bigger. And Kim Tiho, the cargo pilot who started it all with nothing but warmth and a blanket, finally understood what his grandmother had taught him so long ago. Kindness is not weakness. Kindness is the strongest thing in the universe.